So in the last session, we have discussed about the defining a class inside your Salesforce instance, and by giving the respective access specified, and we have defined the various members inside the class to be used to store some data related to a customer or a product or whatever it may be. Now, once the class has been defined by having the respective members inside that, by having the respective variables, then how can we access these members of the class? How to access the members of the class? How can we access? By using object, right? In this case, once the class has been getting defined with the respective members, in order to access the members of the class, we are going to be using the help of object. You know what exactly an object, what it contains. We have discussed. When coming to an object is nothing but a logical entity. Okay, object is nothing but a logical entity which is used to access the class members. Whatever the members you have defined inside that class, that member may be either a variable or a property or a constructor or a procedure or a function, whatever it might be. In order to access these members of the class, we need a reference, we need a key, or we need an instance that is called as object. Then how can we create an object of the class? What is the syntax? And by using that object, how can we access those members? How can we access a variable? And what we can do, okay, on those variables by using these objects. Okay, now let's see. So now in this case, for example here, assume that I have a variable. Just now, I have defined a variable here, integer sum x. On this variable, what we can do, we can store some value inside this variable. Okay, we can assign some value. I would like to assign some value. Once the variable has been defined, and inside this variable, we can able to store some value by assigning the value for this variable. And once the value has been getting assigned, we can able to display the value of this variable also. We can able to display. That means we can access. That means here we are going to be assigning. That means we are writing. We are setting some values. So we can able to assign some value for the variable, and we can retrieve the value of the variable also. Okay. In this case, in order to perform both read operation, write operation, that means to read the value, to assign the value, we are using the help of object. Whenever a class has been defined with the required members, with the required variables, to access that variable values or to assign the values for these variables, we need to use the object. With the help of object, we can able to access each and every member of the class, and we can assign the value for the variable, and we can retrieve the values also. That means to assign and to retrieve the values, we are using this object. Okay? Clear? Objects are used for what? Objects are used to access the class members. By accessing the class member, what we can do? We can assign some value for the variable, and we can retrieve the value of the variable also here. Okay? Now make a note over here. How can we create the object of the class? Now let's see practically. Now, objects. Now, object is a logical entity. Object is a logical entity which is used to access the class members. Which is used to access the class members. By using the object of the class, we can assign the values for the variables, and we can access the values from the variables. That means we can assign the values, and we can able to retrieve the values also with the help of these objects. Okay, we can assign the value, and we can retrieve the values of these class variables. In this case, how can we create the object of the class here? Syntax. In order to create the object of the class, we have to follow this syntax. We have to give the class name and give the name of the object equals to new class name. So this is the syntax we need to follow in order to create the object of the class. In order to create the object of the class, we have to follow this syntax. Use the name of the class for which you are going to be creating the object. Give the object name and then use the keyword new to allocate the memory for this object and then call the default constructor of the class here. Okay, call the default constructor of the class. Okay, now what this syntax represents, what it will do internally here. Okay, now let me explain practically. Done with the syntax? Now, for example, assume that I'm having a class. I'm having a class inside my organization, like public class products info. Inside my class, I'm defining some members. Public integer, the product code. Public decimal, unit price. Public string, product name, manufacturer. Public date and then manufacturer date, nothing but manufacturing date and the expiry date. And the public boolean is in stock. So these are the various variables that I have defined inside my class. So these are called as members of the class. Okay, these are called as the members of the class. You know what exactly a public access specifier indicates, private, protected, global, all these things we have discussed in the previous session. Okay, now you know the class syntax, how to define the variables also, you are aware of that. Now, so now once the class has been getting defined, okay, to manage that product's information, now in order to access these members, okay, in order to access these class members, we need to create the object. So now whenever we are creating the object here, we have to follow this syntax. Now, we need to create the object of the class. In order to access that class members, we need to create the object of the class. Okay. So this is the object of the class I need to have. So this is my class. In order to access that object of the class, we need to create the object of the class here. Okay. Now, so now tell me how can we create the object of the class now? Okay. Class name. Now tell me what is this class name in this case? Products info. I'm giving that object name as some p info equals to new products info. So I'm creating the object of the class by using this syntax. We have to specify the name of the class for which you are creating the object, give the object name, any name we can provide, and then use a new keyword, and then we can specify that class name. Okay. Now, in this case, here we are having some 4 words are available here. Products info, and the p info, new keyword, and the last one. 4 parts are available in this case. So now here in this case, what each and everything will represent here. Let me explain. So this is the syntax that we have inside my object creation. So in this case, the first one, you know, as usual, it represents the name of the class. Okay, it represents the name of the class here. The first one is representing the name of the class. for which class you are creating that object here. The name of that class will be representing by this first word. The second word is indicating that object name. With which name you are creating the object here. Next, the third one. What this new keyword will do? Memory allocation. Okay, now the memory allocation. Memory allocation processing will be taken care by the new keyword. Now, the last part is nothing but what? This last part is called as default constructor. It is called as default constructor. Then what this default constructor will do basically here? Okay, now let's see practically one by one. Okay, now in this case, whenever I'm going to be creating the object here, okay, whenever I'm creating the object here, we are having the class name and then object name. Okay, class name and object name. Now, for example, in this case, whatever the statement that I have written, the same statement I can able to write in another manner also. Let me explain. So we can able to write like this. Products info, some p info, and then you can specify p info equals to new products info. We can able to write like this also, no problem. Any one of that. It may be in a single line, it may be in the two lines also, we can able to split. That possibility is available here. So now in this case here, for example, if you take this syntax, products info, some p info, how it is looking like? Like as integer x, string some yes, like that. It is representing like that. It's a similar kind of syntax. Okay. Now, integer in the sense what? For example, I'm defining the variable, integer some x. Now, integer is what? Data type. X is what? Variable. Like the similar way, products info is what? Data type. P info is what? Variable. Okay. But in this case, if I am defining like as a variable integer x, how many bytes of memory will be getting reserved? 4 bytes. Why? It is having fixed size. But if it is a products info, then for this p info variable, how many bytes of memory do I need to reserve? Because products info is not a standard data type given by Salesforce, it's my own class. Okay, it's my own class, which I have defined with the respective members inside it. In this case, how many variables you can define inside a class? N number of variables I can define. There is no limitation. Okay, there is no limitation that I can define n number of variables inside a class also. So that depends upon the data type of the variable, depends upon that number of variables we need to identify how much memory is required. For that one, we are going to be using the help of new keyword. That already you are aware of that new keyword is internally having that space complexity algorithm, which is identifying how much memory needs to be get reserved for the variable. Okay, so if it is an integer, there is a fixed size 4 bytes which has been allocated by the Salesforce, but I'm having my own data type that is called as products info. That means it's my own class, which is having so many members available inside this here. These are the various members are available with different data types. So at that time, depends upon the number of variables, depends upon the type of the variable, we need to identify how much memory needs to be get reserved, that much of memory we need to allocate. For that one, we are going to be using the explicit help of this new keyword. Okay. So in this case, if it is an integer x, no need to use any new keyword. But if you are using your own class, then we have to use the help of new keyword in order to indicate that. So please go to the respective class products info. Please verify how many number of variables are available, what type of variables are available. Based on those variables, how much memory needs to be get allocated. So please calculate that memory allocation and assign the memory and allocate that memory to this p info variable here. That means what? We are going to be calculating the required amount of memory with the help of this new keyword, and we are going to store allocating that memory to this variable here. Okay, clear? Understood the concept here? Now, so in this case, whenever I'm going to be using this first two lines here, first line of code. So now products info, that means this is a class which I'm going to be using that to access the members here. Now, in order to access the members, I'm creating the object with the name p info. This is the object name. If it is an object here, now tell me, memory will be allocating for whom? For the class or for the object here? Object. So here also memory is allocating for the object here. Then how much memory do I need to allocate for my object p info? 4 bytes, 6 bytes, 20 bytes, 100 bytes, how many bytes? Now, we need to define dynamically here. For that one, we are using the new keyword. New keyword is going to be having that space complexity algorithm internally, which will go to the respective class. It is going to be identifying the number of variables and the type of the variables. Based on that, it will calculate how much memory is required. That much of memory will be getting reserving for this object here. Okay. Now, for example, for this object, it requires some 40 bytes of memory here. So that much of memory will be getting reserved. Okay, that much of memory will be getting reserved. For example, 40 bytes of memory is required. So that much of memory will be getting reserved. Assume that here the 40 bytes. Okay, 40 bytes of memory is required here. In this memory, what it contains? It contains the values for these variables. Whatever the members you have defined inside the class, for these members, it will be holding the values here. Now tell me, isn't any value for these variables in this case? No. Now, in this case here, whatever the memory has been reserved for this object, in this memory it will be holding the value for these variables. What variables are available? We are having product code. We are having the unit price. We are having the product name, manufacturer, manufacturing date, expiry date, is in stock. So now these are the variables will be getting residing inside that object over here. Now tell me, do we have any value for these variables now? No. We haven't assigned any value. If I'm not assigning any value, then what is the value will be allocating by Salesforce by default? Who will allocate that null value? Who will allocate that? Now, at that time, this last part, the default constructor here, this last part. So now the default constructor is going to be allocating the default value as null for each and every variable inside your class. So now here, when coming to the new keyword is going to be calculating how much memory required for this particular object here. That is purely based on the class syntax. That is purely based on the class members, the number of variables available inside the class and the type of the variables available inside the class. It will calculate the required amount of memory. That much of memory will be getting reserving for this particular object here. In that object memory, it will be holding the value for that class members. But in this case, we haven't assigned any value for these class members. So now in this case, the last part, that is default constructor, will be getting invoked. Now the default constructor is going to be storing the default value as null for each and every member inside the class here. So now inside that, it will be storing the default value as null. For this member, default value is null. For this one, default is null. For this also, default is null. For this one also, default null value. For this one, default null. For this one, default null. It may be any type of variable, whatever we have. For every variable, it is allocating the default value as null by the default constructor. Default constructor is going to be invoking automatically. It is going to be assigning the default value for your variable. Okay, default value for your variable. Okay, now it will be allocating the default value as null for each and every member which you have inside the class. This is the internal functionality of object creation. Whenever I'm going to be creating the object here, okay, whenever I'm creating the object just by writing this line of code, now the new keyword is going to be calculating the required amount of memory. That much of memory will be getting reserving for this particular the object here. And once the memory has been getting reserved, now it is passing that memory address to the products info constructor. Now the constructor is going to that memory location. It is assigning the default value as null for each and every variable by default here. Okay, clear? Understood the concept here? Now, so now here in this case, whenever I'm going to be creating the object of the class, then by default, Salesforce is going to be assigning the default value as null for each and every member inside the class. Okay, clear? Now make a note of this one. Syntax. Here we can able to write the syntax like this also. Second format. Class name, and we can specify the object name. And we can specify object name equals to new class name. Any one of the syntax we can able to follow. For example, I want to create the object of the class over here. Like as some products info or product details. P details equals to new product details. I'm having some customer details class. So now see cust details equals to new customer details. So now tell me in this case, for one class, how many objects we can create? Only one or multiple? Multiple also we can able to create. At that time, what is the rule that we need to follow? What is the rule? Can I give the same name for multiple objects here? No. Object name should be always unique. Okay. Now, make a note. A class can have one or more objects, but object names should be always unique. But object names should be always unique. For example, I am creating the objects like this. For example, customer details here. It has some C details 1. Customer details, some C details 1 equals to new customer details. Customer details C details 2 equals to new customer details. Okay, like that here we can able to create the multiple objects also for the same class with different object names. Okay, with different object names. Now, upon creating the object of the class, by default, Apex will store the default value. Apex will store the default value as null for each class member. For each class member, okay, Apex programming will be assigning the default value as null. With the help of the default constructor, it is going to be making the default value as null for each and every class member by default. Done? Understood the concept of each and every word which we are using in the object creation? The first word is representing the name of the class for which you are creating the object here. And the second one is indicating the actual object name for whom the memory will be getting allocated. And which is going to be acting like as the instance or the key for your class. And the new keyword is going to be calculating the memory dynamically at runtime. Once the memory has been getting calculated, it is going to be reserving the required amount of memory. It will be assigning that memory to that object here. Once the variables has been getting stored inside this object's memory, then for each and every variable, it is going to be allocating the default value as null with the help of that default constructor. Default constructor is going to be assigning the default value as null for each and every class member inside your object. Okay. Done with these points now? Now. So now here once object has been getting created, then what we can do, with the help of this object, we can able to access the variables and we can able to assign the values also. Okay. Now, then how can we assign the value, how to retrieve the values? Okay, now let's see practically in this case. Assigning the values. How to assign the values here? By using the object of the class, we can assign the values to the class members as below. We can assign the values to the class members as below. The syntax is we can specify the object name dot the member name equals to value. Whatever the value you want, you can able to assign the value over here. For example, p details dot product code like as some 100001. P details dot product name like as some laptop. P details dot some unit price. I'm assigning some 40,000. Like that, we can able to assign the value here. By using that object, we can assign the value for the class members, and then we can retrieve the values also from the class members here. Retrieving the values. Now, by using the object of the class, we can retrieve the class member values as below. And the syntax, we can specify the object name dot member name. For example, system dot debug. Product code is p details dot product code. I'm accessing that member values by using object name dot member name. System dot debug product name is p details dot product name. System dot debug some unit prices p details dot unit price. Like that, we can able to access the members also. That means we can perform both read and write operations on your class members with the help of this object. So now we can define the class with the required members. In order to access those class members, to assign the value or to retrieve the values, we are using the help of objects. So create the object of the class, and with the help of that object, we can able to access the class member, or we can assign the value to the class member. Now, as of now, we have discussed how to create a class and how to create an object of the class to access the class members, and how to assign the values to the class members with the help of object, and how can we retrieve the values from the class members we have discussed. Now let's see a practical example on that, the complete process. Creating a class, creating the object, accessing the values, assigning the values. Both, all these 4 steps we'll see with a practical example now. Now. So let me take a small use case here. Take a small use case. Create an Apex class. to manage the customer details and assign the values for the variables and retrieve the values from the variables by using object. Now, I want to create an Apex class which is used to manage my customer details. You know, the similar kind of class already we have created in the previous session. And then I would like to assign the value for that class members. So that we need to create the object. And then once the values has been getting assigned, then I would like to retrieve the values of those members also by using that object. Then how can we do that? We'll see practically now. I want to define this class and I want to create the object and I want to assign the values. I want to retrieve the values of that members also. Okay. How can we do that? Now let's see practically in this case. Okay. So let me create a class here. I want to create the class first. How to create the class? You know that syntax, you know that navigation process also. Okay. Now, so let me go to my Salesforce instance. I'm going to the developer console in order to create a new Apex class. It is loading this editor still. So now let me create an Apex class. Click on File menu, New, Apex class. You know how many ways are there to create the Apex class, everything you are aware of that. I'm creating a class with the name, some customer helper. Okay, customer helper. With this name, class is already there. Customer utility. No. So now here I'm creating a class with the name customer utility. This is my class name. So inside this customer utility class, I would like to define some members to store the customer details here, like customer ID, customer name, his age, his qualification, and along with that, the balance amount of the customer, and then his birth date, joining date. I like that I would like to store some information. So for that one, I would like to define some members inside this. I'm defining the members, public, integer, the customer code, and the age. I'm defining the members here. To store the customer name in designation. Along with that, address. Public decimal balance amount of the customer. Public date, birth date of the customer, and the joining date. Public Boolean is active. Whether the customer is inactive or not. For that one, I'm defining these members here. These are the various members, these are the various variables I'm defining inside my class customer utility, which is used to store the customer details, like the customer code and the age of the customer, customer name, designation, address, balance amount, and the date related fields, is active, all these things. These are the various members I'm defining inside my class, which are used to store the customer details here. Okay. Now let's save this class code by using the Control S. Okay. You know that concept here. How to create the class, how to save the class, everything you are aware of that. So now my class has been saved successfully. Okay, my class has been saved successfully. Now tell me how to create the object of the class. Creating the object is for what? To invoking that class members, right? That means to access that class members, right? So at that time, invoking that Apex code should be done from where? In order to invoke your Apex code, we are having 9 ways are available. Already we have discussed in our starting classes. So now from those 9 ways, we are having one way called as execute anonymous window. So I would like to go to the execute anonymous window, and from that execute anonymous window, I would like to create the object of the class. From there, I would like to access each and every member. I would like to assign some values, and I would like to print the values also inside my debug log file. So that I need to create the object of the class. So now this developer console, standard navigation, these are all are only to write the code. That's it. We can't execute from here itself. In order to execute the code, multiple ways are available. That's what I told you in our initial classes itself. In order to write your Apex programming code, we have some different ways. In order to execute your Apex programming code, we are having some different ways are available. Like, now, in order to write that code, okay, in order to write your Apex programming code, we are having standard navigation is there, developer console is available here, execute anonymous window is also there, and then we are having Eclipse IDE. But to execute that code, we are using this 9 ways are available. These are the 9 ways has been given by Salesforce team. Each and every way we will see during this development concept itself. Okay. So in this case, I want to write the code, I want to execute it. For that one here, I would like to use that developer console to write the class code, and to execute that class code, I would like to use that execute anonymous window. Why? Because as of now, whatever the piece of code that I have written, that we are writing that code inside the execute anonymous window. If I am writing the code in the execute anonymous window, that code will not be saving into the metadata repository. But now from now onwards, I am writing some business logic using the class. Because classes will be having the actual business logic, that business logic I want to store inside the metadata repository, so that we can able to reuse that same business logic whenever I need, wherever I need inside my application. For that one, I want to write once, I want to reuse n number of times, okay, depends upon my application requirement. So that I want to make that code reusable. So that I want to save that code inside that somewhere inside the metadata repository. For that one, I am writing the code within that class. So now here inside that class here, I am going to have written that variables. Now once the class has been saved successfully, then whatever the class code that you have written, this entire class code will be storing inside that metadata repository here. From there, we can able to invoke whenever you want. So that creating the class, defining the members, writing the business logic, everything we are using by using developer console. If you want to invoke this class code, if you want to create the objects, all these things, then we can go with that execute anonymous window. Okay. From the execute anonymous window, I would like to invoke this class code here. Okay. Then how can we invoke this class code here? Now tell me. First of all, what we need to do? Create the object of that class. Just now we have defined the class over here. Now my class is ready. I want to access this class members. For that one, we need to create the object of the class. Create the object of the class. How can we create the object of the class? Now tell me. Class name. What is that class name now? Customer utility. Customer utility, I'm indicating that some C util equals to new customer utility. You can give any name for that object over here. Don't give the single characters. Give some meaningful name for your object names also. Okay. Now, don't give like as customer utility, some C equals to new customer utility. Don't give the single characters. Okay. Now, so now once the object has been getting created, so now this is the syntax we need to follow to create the object of the class. Now it is indicating this is the class for which you would like to create the object. This is the name of the object. This new keyword is used to allocate the memory. And then this last part, this is called as default constructor, which will be assigning the default value for this each and every class member as null. Now, in this case, you can raise a question, sir, what is the guarantee to me that this default constructor is assigning the value as null? Then, what is the guarantee to me here? How can we show the practical proof? We can execute. That means we need to print the value. If I'm printing the value, then it has to show what value is available here. I'm not assigning any value, I'm printing the values here. Printing the values. How can we print the values now? System.debug. Now, customer code. Customer code is I want to access. Now tell me how can we access it here? cutil dot customer code. And then I want to show that. Customer name is I want to show that. cutil dot customer name. System.debug the balance amount. Balance amount. System.debug and is customer active. I want to indicate cutil dot is active. System.debug birth date of the customer. cutil dot birth date. I'm accessing each and every member. So in order to know the practical proof, what values this default constructor will assign, I want to know. For that one here, I'm going to printing the value directly. Here, what value it has been assigned, that value will be getting printed. So I'm using the system.debug statements in order to access that variable values. Okay. So whatever the value is available inside the variable customer code, to get that value, I'm using the help of object. Why? Because this variable has been defined inside the class. So to access that class members, we need to use object here. I'm using object name dot member name. Object name dot member name. Okay. Now, let me execute this piece of code. The request has been sent to the server. Let's see. Select the debug only. What values are there? Default value is null. Even though it may be numerical, it may be decimal, it may be date, it may be string, everywhere it is assigning the null values. Now, customer code is of type what? Numerical. That means integer. It is assigning null. Customer name is what? String type. Null as it has assigned. Balance amount decimal type. Null. Customer active boolean. Here also is assigning null. Date field also null. That means everywhere. By default, when coming to the default constructor is going to be assigning the default value as null for each and every member, irrespective of the data type here. That variable may be any data type, whatever. It may be integer, double, decimal, ID, whatever it might be, it will be assigning the default value as null. This is the internal functionality of the object creation. These are the 4 parts are available in the object creation. The name of the class for which you are creating the object, with which name you are creating the object right now, how much memory you are allocating for that one, we are using that new keyword, and what is the default value for that variable, we are using this. Okay. So now for that one, we are using this syntax here. Suppose, for example, if I am using this syntax of integer x, what will happen internally by default here? What will happen? It will be allocating the memory here. How much memory will be allocating over here? 4 bytes. Okay, it will be allocating that 4 bytes. The 4 bytes of memory will be getting allocated. Now this memory is going to be assigning to this particular variable x. Now tell me, what is the default value that we have inside this variable right now here? Null. In this case here, inside this particular variable, it is assigning the default value as null. Okay, you will be having that null value. Okay, we are having that null value by default here. This will be taken care by the Salesforce itself by default, because these are the standard data type. For my data type here, now the default constructor is going to be taking care of that functionality. It is assigning the default value as null. And then this new keyword is going to be allocating the required amount of memory for this particular variable. That means object here. Okay, clear? Now, the same functionality like as here also. Here also 4 bytes of memory is allocating. It will be storing the default value as null. Here it is calculating the memory dynamically because it is holding so many number of variables are there inside my class. Based on the data type, based on the number of variables, it has to calculate the memory. For that one, we are using new keyword. And to assign the default value as null, we are using the help of default constructor inside this. Okay? Clear? Now. Now, in this case here. So now in this case, by default it is storing the default value as null. But I want to assign some values. Then how can we assign? Assigning the values. How to assign the values now? Okay. Object name dot variable name. So that is customer code. Now I want to assign some 240056. C util dot customer name. I'm assigning like some Suresh Kumar. C util dot what are the other members are available inside my class? Age. Age equals to some the T. I'm allocating that. C util dot designation. Designation equals to, I'm assigning the value as he is a developer. C util dot address. I'm indicating like some Hyderabad. C util dot the birth date. Okay, birth date. Then what we can do? How can we assign the date value? For that one, we are using date class. Date dot new instance. Okay, date dot new instance. So now here in this case, date is a standard class, this is the data type. This is a class internally. So now in this case here, inside this class, we have a method called as a new instance method in order to assign some date values. Now we have to supply the 3 parameters here, year, month, and the day. Now I want to give the year as like some, so now 1990. And then the month is some 3rd month. And the date is some 24th. I'm indicating like this. Okay. The March 24 and the 1990 will be the date of birth of that customer here. And then I'm indicating. C util dot joining date. I'm indicating system dot today. Joining date is today. Now, C util dot balance amount. What is the balance amount of the customer? I'm indicating 10,500. C util dot is active equals to true. Now he is a very active customer inside my organization here. So now in this case, once object has been getting defined, okay, once object has been created for your class, then we can able to assign the value for those members by using object name dot member name. Specify the object name and then member name and assign the value whatever you want. So this variable is of type string, so we are going to be enclosing that value inside my single quote. And this is the date data type, so that we are going to preparing the date values here. Okay, now. So now here I'm passing that values. Now I want to print that values again here. Display the customer details. Display the customer details. Here I'm indicating a line break. So to print that customer details, already we have written some piece of code. Let me take that same piece of code here. I want to show the some more variables. System.debug, customer age. C util dot age. System.debug, customer address. C util dot address. Like that we can able to display the values. Okay. We are creating the object of the class. We are assigning the values and then we are displaying the values by using object here. Okay. In order to access that class members, we need the object. Okay, we need the object. With the help of object, we can able to assign the values and we can retrieve the values also from that class. Understood the concept here? How can we assign the value? How can we retrieve the values? Everything. Creating the objects. Now let me execute this piece of code. Click on execute. The request has been sent to the server. We can able to see the results. Select the debug only. Initially it is storing the default value as null, and then later we have assigned the value, so it is displaying those values whatever we have assigned. The customer code value, name value, balance amount value, customer age, address, customer active status, and then the date of birth of the customer over here. All this information we can able to see inside this. Okay. If you want to use a time, then we have to use time class. Time dot new instance. If you want to use both the date and time, then we have to use a data type called as date time data type here. Date time dot new instance. Here we need to supply over here. Okay. Here we need to supply. So now year, month, day, and the hours, minutes, seconds. We need to pass. Okay. To indicate a specific date and time value both. Which one? No, because birthday date I have defined like as a date type data type here. Date data type. So that only date value we can supply. If you're passing the time, it will be giving the wrong message here. Format will be available. Okay, clear? Understood the concept here? Creating the class, creating the object, and then assigning the values, retrieving the values. If you know these four steps, then the next concepts are very, very easy for you. Okay? Now, so let me copy this code. I'm indicating over here because which code we need to write where. Okay, clear? Now, let's start write a small class over here. Define an Apex class to manage the student details and assign the values and retrieve the values. Assign the values and retrieve the values. Now, let's start writing the code. I want all these 4 steps. Define the class, create the object, assign the values, retrieve the values. For the student, what kind of details generally we can capture? Student ID, name of the student, age of the student, birth date of the student, address information, fees amount, and then we are indicating that whether the student is studying in the class or not. That means he is active or not. Okay, these are the details over here. Start define a class, okay, with the name student details, and then define the members, assign the values by creating the object and retrieve the values. Okay, now start writing that class code. Now, so let me give that piece of code so that if anybody not yet done, please make it add this code, or else if anybody has done any mistake, then please correct it as well. So now as a step one, we need to create the class. I'm creating an Apex class with the name some student helper. Okay, I'm creating a class with the name some students helper. Inside this class, I'm defining the variable like public integer student ID and the age. Public decimal fee amount. Public string name of the student, and then I would like to specify the address of the student also. Public date, birth date, and the joining date also. And the public boolean is active. Whether the student is in active status or not. Currently he is studying in our school or not. I would like to know that here, the active status of the customer or the student. For that one, these are the various members that I have defined. ID of the student, age, fee amount, name of the student, address, date of birth, joining date in the school, and then active status of that student. These are the various members I have defined here. Now tell me what is the next step. We need to create the object of the class here. Now, I'm creating the object of the class. I need to create the object of the class. Now tell me how can we create the object of the class here. My class name is student helper. So student helper, now some S helper equals to new student helper. I'm creating the object here. Now, so once the object has been getting created, then what we can do? Assigning the values. I'm indicating that. S helper dot student ID. I'm assigning the value 100456. Yes, helper dot name. I'm assigning like some Kiran Kumar. Yes, helper dot address. I'm indicating some Kukatpalli, Hyderabad. Yes, helper dot age. I'm indicating the age as some 15 years. Yes, helper dot, I would like to indicate that birth date. Okay, birth date equals to, I'm indicating that date dot new instance. Okay, new instance. I'm going to be indicating that 2004, and then I would like to indicate some May and then 24th. I'm indicating that. Yes, helper dot joining date. System dot today. I'm indicating that. Whenever if you want to get the today's date and the future dates, then we can go with system dot today and system dot today dot add days. If you want to prepare the old dates, then we have to use date dot new instance. By using this date dot new instance, we can prepare both old days, future dates also both. We can able to indicate that. Okay, that facility is available. Now, yes, helper dot fee amount. I'm indicating some 45,000. Yes, helper dot is active. I'm indicating the value true. So now here we have assigned the value for each and every member defined inside that class. Inside my student helper class, we have defined so many members here. For each and every member, I have assigned the values over here. Once the values have been getting assigned, then how can we access these values? Then how can we print the values here? System dot debug student ID. Because student ID is, then how can we access it over here? Yes, helper dot student ID. That means everywhere, whenever you are assigning, whenever you are retrieving, in both the cases, object is mandatory. Without the object, we can't access the class members. Okay, it's a fundamental principle of object-oriented programming. Now, student name. Yes, helper dot name. Student system dot debug the fee amount. Yes, helper dot fee amount. System dot debug birth date is, yes, helper dot birth date. System dot debug the student age is, I want to indicate. Yes, helper dot age. Student dot debug address. Address is, yes, helper dot address. T is active. Yes, helper dot is active. I'm accessing each and every member here by using object name. Upon assigning the value also, we have to use the help of object. Upon retrieving the value also, we have to use the help of object. Okay. If it is an array, we are purely relying on indexes. If it is a object-oriented programming, then purely we have to rely on objects here. Okay, we have to create the object. With the help of object only, we can access the class member and we can able to assign the values. Okay. So now in this case, I'm executing this piece of code. Click on execute. The request has been sent to the server. It will print the student details. Select the debug only checkbox. Now we have supplied so many values. So student ID value, name, amount, and the birth date, age, address, and the is active status. All this information we have displayed. Suppose, for example, for one variable, okay, like some fee amount, I haven't specified any data type here. Then what will happen in this case? If I'm not giving any access specified for the member, then what is the default access specified? Private, right. Whenever you are trying to be executing this piece of code, let's see. Now I have created the object here. Now through this object, I'm trying to be accessing that member. Now tell me here, can we access the private members of the class from outside? No. Now let me execute. Click on execute. Now it is giving this information to you. Exception is available. Variable is not visible. That means you can't accessible this variable, that is student helper dot fee amount. Inside this class, student helper fee amount variable cannot be accessible to outside because this member has been completely restricted within the class only by making that access specified as private. Okay. If it is a private member, you can't access from the outside. Okay. Now, so in this case here, if I am not giving any data access specifier for any of the member, then the Apex class is making the default access specifier for the member as private. Okay. Now, so now here I'm indicating public. Now let's save this class code. Save the class code. Now still it is saving my class code. Now my class code has been saved successfully. Now let me execute this code. Now it will be executing as it is. So the private members of the class cannot be accessible from outside. So that upon defining the variable within the class, so now please take care about the access specifiers. If you are forgetting about the access specified, then it will not be accessible from outside of the class over here. Okay? Clear? Understood the concept here? Creating the class, defining the object of the class, assigning the values by using object, retrieving the values from by using that object itself. Okay. Now, let me place the class code. Okay. Now, so now this is the base, okay, for the next concept, that is CRM. Okay. So the ORM concept here. Okay. So what exactly the ORM? Okay, we'll see in tomorrow's session. In tomorrow's session, we are going to discuss about the ORM concept, what exactly the ORM, and then what the ORM will do internally, how it is transforming my objects into the class, how it is transforming my fields into the variables, and how can we use those class in order to connect to my objects through programming, how to manage the records inside your object through programming, how to create independent records, how to create associated records, how to create bulk records also. Okay, we'll see practically, okay, from tomorrow onwards. Don't miss the tomorrow's session. Tomorrow's session is most important for the next future development concepts. Okay, ORM concept is the most important concept for the next database operations.